Long trails are amazing. You're cruising down for what can seem like an eternity of bike riding bliss, but until wham, it hits you, you actually realise you're pretty tired. Or do you know what, maybe you're an aspiring enduro racer and those long runs are really killing you when it comes to race day. Well, fear not, because today I've got some excellent advice for you on how to ride really long runs and trails, and we're going to be dropping into this Top Chief, a 2.8k fun-filled beauty of a downhill track. First up then, we're going to talk about bike setup, because there's some great little subtle changes all you guys and girls can make to your bikes out there to really help you handle the real big stuff when those trails do get nice and long. Comfort is key here, and contact points are where we're going to start with. So things like your grips. Now, grips play a massive part. Have you ever got to the bottom of a run and thought, holy moly, my hands are on absolute fire, and you've got full on arm pump and you've got like the claw coming off and you just can't move it? Well, thinking about what grips you run, it can make a huge difference here. So if you've got quite large hands, like I've got quite big palms, so I try and run a bigger grip so that my hand isn't wrapped all the way around it and I'm having to grip on tighter. Compound as well, that can be altered so you can get the same grip but with different compounds. So maybe look at something a little bit of a softer compound. If you're finding it really hard, you're getting big calluses and things like that, a softer compound grip can also help take the vibrations out of the ground as well, so the sting out of the tail, if you like. When it comes to suspension, think about dropping a few PSI out of those air chambers. Softer suspension is going to give you slightly more small bump compliance and make things a lot more comfortable. Now, to counteract this, you could put in an extra token or volume spacer, if you like, so that if you do start blowing through the travel, well, then it is going to ramp up. But think about it over the long run. If you've got a really firm suspension, like what a lot of racers use, they do that so they can skip over bumps and really hammer it. Well, if you're doing long runs, you might want to be taking it a little bit easier and so a little bit more comfortable. Tyre pressures then, much like suspension, is well worth dropping a couple of PSI out as well. You're going to get a little bit more compliance in the tyre, a little bit more softness, much like the suspension. And all these marginal gains, well, they'll all add up to a lot more comfort over the long run. However, like I said, if you are going to be racing and you're tackling these really long, gnarly trails, 10-minute plus enduro stages or whatever, well, if you do drop the pressures, think about putting something like a tyre insert in there, or certainly going tubeless. That way you're going to hopefully minimize the risk of getting punctures along the way while still being able to hammer the full length of the run. Fitness can play a huge role in mountain biking, but when you start hitting those mega trails, well, this is when it can really test your mental fortitude and your physical ability, just being able to carry on for such a long time. Long descents and runs aren't just going to test you cardiovascularly, but also your strength as well. The ability to sort of hold your body up and keep a good form and posture on the bike without sort of going all floppy Giuseppe on it and just every time you hit a bump. So when your arms get really tired, so actually working on both of those systems is a really good idea. Slowly building up a solid level of fitness is a great way of starting and then progressing on from there. But if you're going to start doing a bit of training or a few rides a week, don't forget, like I said, to build up that fitness. Try and include some upper body workouts and some core workouts as well. That way it is going to help you try and keep a good form on the bike. And because you must have noticed, by the time you get to the end of a run, a bit of arm pump and your shoulders and stuff are killing. By working on these areas, well, then that risk should be minimalized and you'll be able to ride harder for longer. By upping your training or your riding and strength work a little bit more, then you might notice that where you were tired 5 minutes into a run before, it could be 7 to 8 minutes before. And not only that, but you'll start enjoying it a lot more as well. Long runs are a constant barrage of obstacles. There's just things coming at you non-stop, often with very little rest in between. Much like this section here, look, you've got this drop straight into another rock garden and things like that. It's relentless, it just keeps you guessing. And because of that, it can be really mentally tiring. Think of it like this. If you're doing a downhill run, it's what, 3 minutes, and it's non-stop 3 minutes, but then it's done. A really long run like this is a 10-minute plus run that we're on today, and that it's just non-stop, minute after minute, second after second. You've got to think and you've got to be on the ball. On a downhill run, then you're probably going to look about 3 to 5 meters in front of the bike because the speeds are so high. All the things are coming at you so fast. Now, when you stretch that run out, the speeds are going to generally get a lot slower, or certainly a bit slower, I know that's for sure. So you've got the time, make sure you're looking ahead a lot more. That way you can process what's coming up as well and really take the time to think about where you're going and what's coming up. Actually, talking about looking ahead leads me nicely onto my next section, and that's line choice. Picking where you're going to go by looking ahead and seeing what's coming up. Longer runs mean more line choice, and that means more chance or more risk of making errors or picking poor lines because you're tired. So we're on a really good example of that here. Now, over a long run, you're gonna get tired, like I said. Your arms are gonna fatigue, your legs. You're just gonna get a bit sloppy on the bike potentially. So thinking about where you're going, combining it with looking ahead, like I said, means that actually you might ride safer and longer and get down the run quicker and easier. Take this bit for example. We're about halfway into this run and we've got quite a big drop here. Lands onto a real sketchy rock garden. Or on the left-hand side, you can go around it. Now, if I'm coming into this and I'm absolutely goosed, the safer option for not just me, but actually getting down, would be to take this board all around the edge rather than potentially landing off of here and just going all squishy on the landing and just folding into the bike potentially. It's definitely something that's worth thinking about. On long runs, brake fade can occur, and this is where over a period of time, as your pads and discs heat up to such a degree, they actually get too hot and lose their bite, and in turn, braking power. This can be from two things mainly, and that's either your brakes aren't powerful enough for the length and type of terrain you're riding, or that sadly, you're just on them brakes too much. We've all been there. To combat this, you can either up your braking gain, so go from a brake caliper with 2 pistons to 4, or upping the rotor size to give you more power. Pad compound can also make a huge difference too, so going for something like a sintered or metallic pad can help dissipate and handle the heat going through it better and still retain its bite. Those big days riding require a lot of fueling, and not just before and after. Becoming dehydrated or riding on an empty stomach quickly send you into the red, and that is definitely not a good thing. If it's a race we're talking about, then make sure you're well fueled up beforehand. So plenty of food, plenty of water to get you nice and hydrated and fueled up, like I said, ready for the day ahead, as it's really tricky to eat and drink on the go. If it's like an enduro race or something like that, then you do get chances to obviously stop in between race stages on the liaisons, and they can be food stations as well. But it is trickier, and you've got to carry your food and that around with you as well. So sort of planning how much you're going to take is really key here. If you're out on a more mellow ride, cruising around with your friends, then eating and drinking on the move can still be a tricky one. So take the time to just pull on over, have a little drink, have a little bit of food, a bar, make sure you pack some energy bars or something. And if you're feeling real hardcore or you're out for the whole day, then something like a backpack with a hydration bladder in it can be really helpful. It means you can take a lot of fluid, 2 litres plus maybe, and you can take enough room for all the snacks and food that you might need as well. So there's nothing worse than bonking. You don't want to do that, I promise. And it does mean that you've got plenty of room to take more than enough. Just think about convenience though. If you're going to take a backpack, then the bigger the bag, the more you're going to end up taking. It's just how it works normally. So think about tailoring what you're going to take for the ride that you're going to do. If it's a short ride, you're probably not going to need tons of fluid. If you're out for an absolute monster of a ride, then a bigger bag and more gear might be useful. Food, drink, spares, etc. This one doesn't need to apply to racing alone, but almost comes under sort of self-preservation. Riding at 95% can be a great way of sort of reining it in and making the most of the trails, and stops you from getting really tired, going into that red zone and making lots of mistakes. By backing things off just a smidge, you're actually going to stand a better chance of keeping both you and the bike in better shape over the long run, so that you don't make extra mistakes or do anything silly that you might do normally if you were charging at 100%. And racers will actually often do this, especially in enduro, where it's such a long day and there are so many stages that the risks are so high of breaking themselves or the bike that they'll just rein it in ever so slightly rather than riding on that absolute ragged edge. So next time you're dropping in some big old gnarly snaky run, why not try dialing it from 11 down to 10 and just sort of going for that kind of self-preservation? Because do you know what? A lot of the time it can actually be quicker over the long run, because you're not going to make those mistakes. You're not going to be as tired, and you can almost charge almost as hard the entire way. But you know what? That's it. I'm done for the day. We have got to the bottom of this big old run as well. And I'm pooped. I need to take some of my own advice, but thank you very much for watching, everyone. Let me know how you tackle long runs down in the comments below. Look forward to seeing you next time. Happy riding. Goodbye.